The Fog Fjord. I've wanted to do a video on this location since I first stumbled across it after finally defeating the incomplete one boss fight on the Black Bridge. This is where I feel the game really opens up and show you what you can expect from this game. It's significantly more difficult than any of the areas before it and has the greatest variety of enemies and introduced the most new enemies of any of the regions before it. Not only that, but it's arguably the largest level given the fact that there are so many different buildings and rooms you can explore. Some contain shops where you can buy new and likely better skills or weapons. Most contain enemies, however. That's not to try and discourage you from exploring them. In fact, I recommend ignoring speed for this level and taking your time to work your way through it. Go through every building and kill every enemy. The practice will help, as will the vast number of cells that will drop from the incredibly large number of enemies found throughout this level. The end of the level is also locked behind a door whose key can only be found inside those buildings you can go into. The Fog Fjord leads to the clock tower if you're interested in meeting some of the deadliest enemies in the game. It also leads to the graveyard if you're interested in an area similar to the promenade, but much more difficult and full of more dangerous enemies than the promenade has. If you make it through this dangerous level, whichever direction you choose to progress in, you can be sure the game will get much more difficult from here. The Fog Fjord is a good place to practice and hone your skills at this game to prepare for the more difficult levels that lie beyond. If you're having too much trouble with the fjord, you're not going to make it through the levels beyond it. Not that anyone would blame you. This level is pretty difficult. It has the regular zombies from the previous levels and the exploding suicide bats as well. It introduces a new kind of zombie-like creature that explodes into a small swarm of teleporting biter enemies. Those biter enemies are incredibly fast and able to teleport to you and can leap and bite at you from a short distance away. There are another kind of these teleporting biters that hide in the corners of some of the rooms. They look similar to the shrub blobs you can interact with after unlocking the vine room, but a bit more brown in color. They aren't just found on the floors, but can be sticking to the ceiling, and when they activate, they look just like the little biters that spawn when you kill the bluish zombie enemies, except that they're more brown in color obviously. Worse than either of these little new threats, is the pirate enemy introduced in this level. With a fast smash attack if you get too close, and a big cannon that shoots a rolling cannonball that can travel quite a distance before exploding, this pirate enemy is not to be trifled with. I do my best to kill them from a distance, as they're so fast. The slowing effect that follows freezing an enemy doesn't make much difference. If you have the Spartan Sandals weapon, you can probably Sparta kick the cannonball back at him just like you can kick the Grenadier's bomb back at him with the sandals. I'm not sure if any other weapon is able to safely knock back those cannonballs, and since getting here can take a long time if you die during the boss fight right before it, I don't try to experiment too much to find out. This is the first level I almost always use up all my healing charges in. More because of how many enemies it has and how long it is than because it's too difficult to get through. Even though it's the area just after the first boss fight, a clumsy mistake or two can deplete almost all your health this late in the game. 3 or 4 mistakes can empty your flask of charges for the whole level, so it's better to play this level safer rather than trying to speed through it. In fact, I'm going to recommend that advice for all levels going forward. Don't try to just rush through them, take your time and try to eliminate the enemies from a safe distance. Even though the Fog Fjord doesn't have any traps, all the enemies in the level help make this a great level to practice on. I would actually say the lack of traps helps make it a good level to practice on. The buildings you can go into make for nice escape areas if they're already been cleared out. Since some lead to different areas of the level instead of just hiding treasure of the key to move on, you can even use the buildings to escape to a safe location you already cleared out if you need the moment of safety to heal and avoid death. The doors to the buildings will have convenient symbols next to them to remind you or alert you of their contents. The building with the key will have a key by the door, treasure will have a treasure chest sign by the door, and so on. It's a nice indicator to help remember where you've been and where you still have to go. If you're trying to speed through the level, it also will help you know which buildings to ignore so you can just grab the key and go. There's a sword throwing enemy that poses a new challenge as well. It's kind of slow, but the sword can be thrown out a fair distance before it spins back to him. While the sword is gone, he's wide open for attack, but if you kill him while it's gone, he's not there to catch it, and you can be hit by the sword as it flies back to where the enemy used to be. Each revolution of the blade counts as a hit, too, so it can quickly shred through your health if you're not quick about escaping or move the wrong way and roll or jump into the blade. Fortunately, they can only throw their blades left or right, so if you can attack them from above or below, you should be safe. Unlike the archer's arrows, you can't duck under the spinning blade, and since I don't use shields in this any more than I do in Dark Souls, I'm not sure if it can be blocked or parried with a shield. Speaking of shields, they're an aspect of this game I've largely ignored. If you've seen any of my other videos on Dead Cells, you might have noticed that I'm never using a shield in them. I've unlocked a fair number of shields to choose from, and they're not without their uses, they just don't suit my fight or flight playstyle in these kinds of hectic action-packed games. Also, not all of the shields negate damage, and no shield will protect against every type of attack. Some shields are just meant to be carried for the passive bonuses they provide, such as negating damage for a brief period of time after getting hit or slightly boosting the amount of gold dropped by enemies. Again, they have their uses, they just don't suit how I play the game. If you like shields, there is a decent variety of them to choose from, and they'll help augment many different defense or counter-attack based playstyles. Anyway, back to the Fog Fjord. I like that this area has a gloomy, haunted feel to it, and I like many different areas you can roll through to escape from or get the drop on enemies. A largely flat area, the Fog Fjord's vertical sections all come from clumps of housing and buildings piled up on what appears to be a very long dock or wooden bridge. The whole level is on planking above some sinister looking water that I'm glad you don't seem to be able to fall into. Given how dark the overall level is, it'd be hard to distinguish where you'd have to jump to avoid falling in while running from or attacking enemies throughout the level. Especially by the building sections with all the decorational netting around. I think this level also has the fewest teleporters of any level so far. Being one long, flat run from end to end, with only a small amount of upward vertical areas to explore, it doesn't really need that many. There's nowhere below the level to explore since it's all on top of water, and some of the buildings can be used to travel to different sections of the level, not to mention this level leaves little reason to backtrack. If you take your time and clear out the enemies as you go, you can likely fight and explore your way to the end of the level without having to go backwards other than to avoid attacks. Depending on the locations of the buildings with keys. What I like most about the buildings is that they have a spot at the end of them you can interact with that will teleport you back to the entrance of the building. There are a lot of mechanics in this game designed to help you speed through the game if you want to, and just avoid backtracking through empty space needlessly. It's like they knew players were going to struggle and have to repeat certain areas several times. Whether they had to struggle or not, players would have to go through areas like the Fog Fjord in this game to reach certain areas such as the clock tower. They also exist as alternatives to locations like the graveyard. If you don't want to fight your way through the ossuary, just pummel the incomplete one, and come here to the fjord. This level is enormous, I'm only about halfway through the level right now. The first gate you can unlock with the keys on this level is about the halfway point. The next key you find will be crucial, because it unlocks the next location you will go to. If you go down on the other side of the fjord at the end of the level past the water, you can unlock the lift that takes you to the graveyard. Alternatively, you can keep going right along the surface and reach the clock tower lift. No matter which direction you choose to go after finding the key, you can be sure that this level, the Fog Fjord, is far easier than either. The Fog Fjord may have a ton of dangerous enemies, but there's plenty of space here to move around in or avoid your enemies' attacks. Thanks to the lack of traps I mentioned before, you don't have to worry too much about these enemies in the fjord. especially if you have skills that do damage over time or can be set up to trap and attack enemies who come near them. The pink biter swarm I've been using for most of this level is my favorite skill. I love having the skill itself at my command, plus as many passive bonuses that grant me extra biters to add to my swarm. It's especially satisfying to use the biter swarm on the first level to introduce the biter swarming enemies of the game. Kind of like how the poison protection amulet of my toxic sewers video was extremely satisfying to get right before going to the sewers. My upgraded throwing knives have a passive ability that grants me a swarm of biters from the corpses of enemies I kill with the knives. They're the first weapons I upgraded, and I managed to do so after claiming the timed bonus after the incomplete one boss fight I recorded before this video and during the same run through the game. At 30 cells apiece, it's a high, but fair, and flat rate to upgrade all your weapons and skills permanently. On future runs, any upgraded weapon or skill will have a plus sign next to its level and name, indicating that it's an upgraded weapon. They also do more damage and get a boost to either tactics, brutality, or survival depending on the weapon or skill's affinity. My upgraded throwing knives also came with some more ammo, which was a nice and unexpected bonus. I'm hoping all the ranged weapons get increased ammo when upgraded. The new Foundry update really added a lot more to do in this game. The increased difficulty and upgraded weapons function similarly to how New Game Plus modes work in other games, and it's a great concept for a roguelite game. If you're a far more skilled player than I am, you'll likely beat the game and unlock all the weapons, mutations, shields, and skills before I will. Maybe you already have, but being able to upgrade all your weapons and increase the difficulty for yourself will add more reasons to keep playing and keep challenging yourself. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap this video up. There are about 10 minutes left before I finish the level, but this level's so long, I cannot complete it much faster than this. There's also not 10 more minutes of things to say about this level. Yes, it's interesting and adds a lot of new enemies to watch out for, and the mechanic of being able to go inside buildings is interesting as well, but it's largely a training ground for the later levels, or a place to be sprinted through on the way to the clock tower or graveyard. It's very nicely set up to allow you to either take your time or make a made dash for the exit. But if you decide to take your time, be prepared to invest a chunk of time to slog through the swarms here. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it was at least somewhat informative. If you liked what you saw and are interested in Dead Cells, consider getting it on Steam or whichever console you might have. If you have any questions or comments about this level or the game, please feel free to leave them in the section below. I hope you enjoy the rest of this gameplay as well. And stay safe till next time. Error. Error. Error.